An explosion of online pictures and information, billions of hours of video for everyone to see and share. But not all of it is true, and some of it is harmful. From images of murder to global hoaxes, how did social media shape our news agenda in 2013? This is Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to 2014 and the first Inside Story programme of the year. I'm Shuli Ghosh. As the new year begins, we've been taking a look back at some of the online videos that went viral in 2013 and the news stories behind them. YouTube says that for every minute of the past year, 100 hours of footage was uploaded onto its website. That is a lot of footage. Information and pictures can sweep through the world at a touch of a button. Social media sites like Twitter and Facebook mean news can reach millions in just a second. But without editorial control, without context, can this global news exchange actually be harmful? Should every picture, however distressing or personal, be available to watch? Should footage that can't be verified be shown publicly? And should there be more control? Let's discuss this with our guests. In London, we have Richard Gisbert, presenter for Al Jazeera's programme Listening Post, and Rachel Clark, Head of Engagement Intelligence, Momentum Worldwide, also in London. Happy New Year to both of my guests. Look, let's start with Syria because we've seen a lot of pictures coming out of Syria, but it is accepted that the war in Syria is one of the hardest conflicts to cover because reporters simply aren't on the ground, and when they are, then they're often restricted in what they can report. So information coming to us is often from witnesses or human rights groups or from the government. So images like these are uploaded regularly onto the internet by activists. In turn, they're shown pretty much every day by news organisations around the world, including Al Jazeera. Now, the pictures certainly seem authentic. They're apparently showing the battle with government troops, but we really can't be 100% sure where these pictures have come from or even if they're current pictures. Richard, let me come to you because, I mean, there's no doubt that we've never been so reliant on these sort of less conventional sources for details of what's going on as we are in the case of Syria.
Yeah, but what are we going to do? What's the alternative? Do we ignore these images? How do we deal with them? I mean, there are a number of things at play here. Not only have the authorities in Damascus tried to keep international journalists out of there, to the best of their abilities. Not only are news organizations shrinking, Shuli, as you and I well know, and they have fewer and fewer resources with which to even try to cover conventional wars, but Syria is a propaganda battlefield, and in the same way that Libya and Tunisia and Egypt were before in the Arab Spring.
And that's the problem, though, isn't it? Because propaganda is on both sides. Don't we and other news outlets run the risk of being forced into a position of showing something even if it's not giving the right information, because there is such an appetite to show something, anything, to cover those hours of news programmes?
Absolutely, and that is why every time we put that stuff on the air at Jazeera or CNN or BBC, that it comes with that proviso that we can't verify this. But as I said, what's the alternative? Do we ignore the video? So what we do is we do the same thing that we do on every story. We do the best we can to authenticate it. And one of the things that Syria has thrown up that we didn't see in Egypt and we didn't see in Libya before is you have this series of middlemen now that exist, sort of clearinghouses for videos. And these are people who are experts. Now, they may have an agenda, but we know how to deal with them. We've dealt with them before, and when new video comes out of Aleppo or out of Hama, we'll get in touch with those middlemen and we'll say, okay, what can you tell us about this source? All we can see is a Twitter handle. We don't know who it is, or if it's an organization or whatever. And this new layer, these middlemen, have emerged on the Syrian story that have helped news organizations at least try to get a better idea of who it is that they're dealing with and who is the source of the information and the video.
Rachel, as Richard says there, every time we put some footage out that comes from an activist uploading images which are said to come from Syria, we say the same thing. We cannot independently verify this footage. Is that enough?
Yes and no. It depends on again, about how people get used to that, because that sort of phrase slowly gets ignored because the video is there. That context doesn't always get put in when it's seen elsewhere, and then if they see it on a respectable news service, then they say, well, it is true. It doesn't matter where it is. And I think Richard is right. What you're looking for is you may not have your people, your journalists on the ground, but how do you develop that network of trust so that at least you have the ability to cross-reference stuff to the best way you can, and you have respected and repeat sources that you can then post-verify to say, well, they were right the last time, when they're more likely to be right this time.
Yeah, and of course it's not just video, is it? I mean, people are posting stuff on Twitter, on Facebook all the time. Again, you can't verify any of that stuff.
And that's even harder to verify because there isn't sort of context around it. There isn't sort of how do you do a location. At least video, there are things you can analyse. When it comes to Twitter, when it comes to words, and you just see a series of statements, you don't know whether or not these are true. And that's valid whether it's coming out of Syria or any other news source. News, people just take tiny little bits and then expand it and put their own twist on it. And sometimes they do it deliberately as well. So you get the hoaxes coming in there. What is the story? It's a lot harder when it comes to just purely words to understand whether or not that's true.
OK, well, let's talk about hoaxes, because the trouble with footage that you can't verify is that, of course, it could very well be false. Take a look at this. This went viral just over a year ago before it was revealed to be a fake. OK, so you see the goat is drowning, and apparently here comes a piggy to save the goat's life. Now, 8 million people fell for that. It was a massive video. There were stories, there were discussions about animal bravery, ability to reason, blah, blah, blah. This was fake. Rachel, that video was basically done to promote a petting zoo in the US. It was made by the Comedy Central team. Is that how marketing works these days? That's
how marketing often used to work and does now and again now. The challenge you have is that under the marketing laws, that video is actually breaks all the rules. It's probably illegal. It's false advertising. You're always supposed to be able to identify what an advert is. And if you look at celebrities on Twitter these days, if they are promoting stuff, they need to have a marker that says advertisement or something like that. And I looked at this video and thought, I'm surprised that the Zoo or Comedy Central didn't get into trouble for that and didn't get fined for producing stuff that's false advertising. But what you've got there is people want to believe it. It's a story that they can believe. It's that element that they say, this is fun. I love the little piggy. And off he goes. And they want to believe it. And so it then becomes a moment of entertainment and then gets treated like that.
And
Go on, Richard.
And the other thing, Shuli, is in a way this is related to what we see in Syria, because media through the years people have used primarily to either put forward an agenda, further a cause, they use it for propaganda, or they use it for commercial purposes. And what we've seen from some of the factions in Syria on the rebel side, because you and I both know that rebel side doesn't speak as one, there are all kinds of rival factions within it. They create a video, they purport to have done something, because what they're trying to do is they're trying to raise funds, get as many weapons as they can. It's about resources for them. And in a funny way, they're related to that petting zoo in California, because they're putting out a video that misrepresents something for what are essentially, in a war zone, commercial reasons, because they want to attract attention, or this rebel leader wants to become a full-on warlord.
That's a really interesting point. And the thing is, hoaxes that have taken in news organisations are nothing new, are they? I mean, I remember the Hitler diaries of the 1980s, which took in a load of newspapers. I mean, even going before that, you had do you remember the story of the Cottingley fairies, which were paper cutout fairies, which had been photographed by 2 little girls. So, how do we stop ourselves, our news organisations, becoming victims of hoaxes like this? It's so sophisticated now. There isn't a way, is there?
Well, what I think is, there's 2 kinds of hoaxes. There's the propaganda hoax that may be related to some rebel leader who wants more weapons. And then there's the hoax that we saw in the petting zoo. And we also have seen, say, coming out of Moscow, there's a scene of a woman who's standing there and gets attacked for her purse, some purse snatcher. She turns around, takes him down, and then escapes. And everyone says, isn't this wonderful? And then you look at the video a little more closely. The lighting's pretty good. The camera location is tremendous. She's taking this guy down. He looks like a bit of a stunt actor, and then she exits the screen, camera right. It's all a little bit too tidy.
A lot of people don't analyze it that closely, though.
Yeah, but for me, the more interesting question is not what media do with it. It's why do people want to see it? And I think, you know, as was stated earlier, fundamentally, this fills a need. We sit and we watch this media all day long, and there are all kinds of gruesome images from war zones or economic calamities, natural disasters, what have you, and we all want to feel good. We want to believe this stuff. And the people who are putting it out may be doing it for reasons because this woman wants to become a stunt actor in Moscow. I don't know. But what I do know about the audience is we want to believe it. So it comes down to a choice. Do you want something that's true and not necessarily, quote unquote, inspirational, or do you want something that just makes you feel good? And there are a lot of people out there in the latter category.
Let me show our viewers this video, because I want Rachel to tell me why people want to see this. Okay, this is a twerking fail. Okay, twerking completely passed me by. It's some kind of dance, but this was a video that got more than 10 million hits in the past week. There you go. She was twerking upside down, falls onto a candle, sets on fire. It's actually quite disturbing when you see it, but in fact that girl was a stunt woman, and this was a whole staged piece. Rachel, this doesn't add to the sum of human knowledge. I suppose it's kind of funny to watch.
Doesn't add to the knowledge, but it's entertaining, and it's a little bit of it's
entertaining as long as you don't think she's actually being burnt.
Well, you don't actually see. You sit there and you're laughing at her with this one, not with them. When it comes to viral videos and videos that sort of be contagious, what I like to say, they need to be awesome, wowsome, or lolsome. And this, for most people, is funny. It's not them, and it is that sort of they've been taken a step back. They're finding somebody who could be having a serious accident funny because of the way it's set up and because of the environment it was in.
What on earth does that say about us?
Not a lot, I think. It's not very good.
Yeah. It's car crash TV in a new medium. And the other thing to keep in mind with this one, this video was put out by the Jimmy Kimmel Show, which is a late-night comedy show in the U.S. The Kimmel people, also the Conan O'Brien people, who are in the same time slot in the Jimmy Fallon Show, they're very good at putting out videos that get all kinds of traction online. And their hope is that online traction, which tends to happen within the 1840 to 49-year-old demographic, which is the prize demographic in just about any broadcast environment. And so they put it out there, they create a buzz. But what they're trying to do, Shuli, is they're trying to attract more people to come watch the television when it's being delivered by more mainstream media in the old-fashioned way, you know, on your television set. So that's what they were doing there. They create a buzz, and they hope that eventually that creates a little bit of a parade of viewers to their own late-night show. They're using new media to reinforce what they're doing on old media.
OK, let's move on to something that's not as pleasant. In May 2013, one of the most horrific murders ever to be shown on television news was committed in broad daylight in London. Soldier Lee Rigby was run over by a car and then attacked by a machete-wielding assailant who tried to decapitate him. Now, the whole incident was captured by street CCTV cameras and subsequently shown on national television news, and there were hundreds of complaints over these images, which showed one of the attackers with blood-stained hands. Rachel, ITV News did edit this before broadcast, but there were complaints that it was broadcast early in the evening when children could be watching. I mean, it's pretty much a horror show. Should we be watching stuff like this? Isn't this voyeurism?
I personally don't think you should be watching it at that point. Later on, within a context, for example, is possible. There is a watershed when it comes to entertainment, that you don't show certain things before 9 o'clock, and violence is part of that. And that, for me, should have been shown later in the day.
So it's just the watershed time that's your issue, not with actually showing the pictures.
Well, I have two. One is, if you're doing it in the evening news, you're going to have children watching, and therefore that's not a very nice set of images to see. And secondly, this is not entertainment. This is not a show. This is not, even though they're pushing the boundaries to get people involved. This is somebody's life. This is a real person being killed. Why are they showing that on news? It used to be that it was all cut off. Why are they putting it on there anyway? And I would challenge that was relevant.
Good
but
question.
Again, it's partly ratings.
Richard, you're a reporter. News or voyeurism?
I think it's news, and I'm kind of with Rachel. My issue is not that it was shown. You can take issue with what time of day it's shown, even though I think some of the imagery that kids see on their video games these days, or even on television that their parents allow them to watch, is probably worse than what they saw there, even if it's not real. A lot of the complaints in the UK were that was simply put on television. What I saw tended to have stuff obscured through the digitizing process. So you didn't really see the victim, nor did I want to see the victim. And the issue was blood on the hands of somebody who's just killed somebody in the UK, which I suppose offended people in a symbolic way. Well, look at the message. He said, this was a Muslim who said that there are all kinds of atrocities being committed in Muslim countries by Western armies every day. They don't get covered like this. Nobody seems to be upset when when images come out of that part of the world, be it Afghanistan,
but just because we don't
Iraq,
show
or other
murders
countries
doesn't mean we have to show that one. I mean, there's quite a lot of detail in that. I mean, I imagine that you would have been very upset if you were a family member or a friend of Lee Rigby. But the point is, it was essentially, we were showing, it was showing a murder on television.
It didn't really show the entire murder, what I saw on the BBC and ITN here in the UK. And frankly, to tell you the truth, this is bigger than the family. Yes, I can see the family being upset that this was shown. I can see the family being much more upset that they lost their son. And the fact that it's on television and a family of 12 people in Birmingham or where he's from, that's made it that much harder, well, that's unfortunate. But the fact of the matter is, it was a significant event that had political implications. And there are 60 million other people in the United Kingdom who need to see and need to perhaps hear the message and at least consider the message from this man, which was, our people are being killed every day in other countries. We've brought the war to the UK. We haven't killed a civilian. We've killed a soldier. And I think there are 60 million people who perhaps needed to hear a message that 12 people or members of his immediate family would have found difficult.
On that point. What's your reaction, Rachel?
Yeah. I think in my perspective, the message, the speech that was said, I could understand broadcasting that, but not the actual murder. That doesn't add anything to the message that he's trying to say, which is in the words. That is voyeurism. So show one element, and I can see the complaints about blood on the hands, but he had something to say, but don't show the actual killing.
All right, let's talk about desensitization.
I think what you do is, Shuli, just hold on a second. I think what you do is you show both. You don't just give him a platform, and you don't just say, get your message out. You show how gruesome this was, and if people want to judge this man harshly, or the movement, or condemn it, or do whatever, they have to see the lengths that people are willing to go to, and that may reflect poorly, obviously, on the assailant. I think just showing the message without showing what happened is lacking the necessary context for people to deal with the information. That's my view. Isn't
that our job? We're journalists, don't we put it into context?
Well, we put it into context, but images and sound also provide contextualization in media every day. It's not just our job. The images provide context as well.
Okay, well, look, let's talk about desensitization and the nature of some of the pictures which are widely available. In September, gunmen attacked the Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi, beginning a siege which lasted for 3 days. Now, security footage from inside the mall showed gunmen stalking people through the shops, families trying to escape, in some cases by playing dead, and armed police hunting the attackers. Now, the footage went viral as soon as it was released. Rachel, some of the footage, I mean, we're not showing all the most gruesome footage there on Inside Story, but there were images of victims covered in blood, people it wasn't clear whether they were alive or dead. Are we in danger of becoming desensitized by the nature of the pictures which are being freely released on the internet?
Yes, I think we are. I mean, if someone's in a situation, they're likely to take a picture and post it up through their own channels. That's an element that goes out there. And as a viewer, as someone who's maybe watching and trying to understand the story, you have a choice to see those. But sometimes they just appear. Sometimes you've not gone and clicked on them. They're in the stream, the way these platforms work. Now, you can easily click away, but what is happening is people are seeing them and just moving on, and they are becoming more desensitized. Blood, gore, all of that stuff. I mean, people who've been killed in very horrible ways, they're now being pushed over with a single click. There's no consideration and therefore no thought about it. And therefore when it appears on the news later, and it's had a context, it's now official, then it becomes more and more accepted.
Richard, some of these pictures actually appeared in the newspaper, didn't they, in Kenya?
Yeah, Shuli, and I don't think we're in danger of becoming desensitized. I think we already are desensitized. And there's one particular image that was making the rounds on the web about, I think, on day 2 of that 3-day story. And eventually that and it was slightly gruesome, the bloodied face of one of the victims. And eventually that picture was then published in The Nation, which is the biggest newspaper in Kenya. And there was all kinds of outrage directed towards the publication, and the editor, the CEO, then ended up going on live on a news channel and apologizing to the country. But I think it's interesting how we got to where we were with that image, because as one of the people that we interviewed in the story that we did on the coverage of Westgate was saying that, you know, we see all this stuff on the web. It comes across as sort of vaguely pornographic in any number of areas. It can be entertainment. They're pushing it further than ever before. You see stuff from war zones, more grotesque and more revealing than ever before, more graphic. And so we see that in all these different areas. And then, you know, presumably the editors at The Nation in Nairobi are trying to compete with the web for eyeballs, and so they take this picture and they put it on the air. And I think what's happened is that their editorial bar has been lowered by what we all look at every day and what they look at every day. And I think that's what's happened there.
That's a good point, yeah. I was going to say the lowering of the bar. So do you think competition between conventional media and social media, internet, is actually producing this problem?
Oh, absolutely, it is.
Yes,
and I think when the stuff gets really big is when it goes on social media, and then it gets put on the mainstream media, and it's amplified even further. But the other point I just wanted to make about Westgate that's really interesting is that eventually, after they had the rescue operation, or this, you know, they attacked and ended the siege. There was viral video that emerged showing Kenyan soldiers looting the Westgate shopping mall. Now, and this was really damaging to the military's reputation, because the Kenyan military held in relatively high standing in that country. The government complained about the coverage. They wanted those pictures taken off, although they had no basis for that argument. And the really interesting part of it was that the soldiers who were looting, some of them were looting cell phones.
Rachel, do you agree with that point Richard was making about a competition between conventional media and what's available there in the World Wide Web, which is making conventional media maybe lower its standards on what it publishes?
Yeah, they're all fighting for the same set of people to look at the stuff. Someone can be published straight onto there. They're picked up by content farms. They're picked up by websites. They're driven by advertising revenue, so they go for the worst type of images. People click on them because they are slightly pornographic in that way. And then the news organisations have to compete with that. So they take the next level down and the next level down to try and get that same audience.
I'll tell you what was interesting about that Nairobi siege as well, the fact that Al-Shabaab was posting on Twitter about its motives and what it was doing. So basically we were getting the news straight from the horse's mouth.
And
yeah, well, why wouldn't they?
Too, Shuli, is,
Go on, Richard.
Some people think that Al-Shabaab's Twitter account is how that whole thing started, and here's why. Shabaab has been very good at using Twitter, and there's all kinds of back and forth, but the problem is that the membership of the group then became critical of the leadership of Shabaab in Somalia, and they were calling their own leaders out on Twitter. Now, this is nothing that Yasser Arafat ever had to deal with in the PLO in the 1970s, having his strategy being, you know, criticized in 140 characters or less by the membership of the PLO. Anyway, and a lot of people there thought that the whole motivation for Shabaab to go into Nairobi the way they did, was because their leadership was under attack from within and needed some kind of spectacular event. And those people are arguing that this whole story had its roots in Twitter.
Guys, it's been a really fascinating discussion. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for coming in on New Year. To both of my guests, Richard Gisbert and Rachel Clark, a big thank you. Now, Al Jazeera has compiled a montage of some of its most watched news stories for 2013. You can find them on our website, aljazeera.com. They are some of the most memorable images of the year. Now, you can also leave your comments about today's Inside Story on our own website page. Just click on Programmes and then Inside Story. While much of the news last year was of war and conflict, we wanted to leave you with this: the power of Gangnam Style to unite. Filmed on a smartphone, this video of Israeli soldiers dancing with Palestinians at a wedding went viral. From me and the rest of the team here, Happy New Year.